about what happened in the Northern Irish state post-partition. But obviously, being born in 1967, I wasn't any part of that. But I was born in the cusp of the civil uprising. In 1972, age 5, I was injured in a no-warning IRA car bomb at 20 past 8 in the morning, walking over to my Sunday school to go away on a trip. But life in those days continued. Unless the violence directly impacted you, people just cracked on with their lives. My granny and granda, my granda was the patriarch of the family, a trade unionist, a shop steward in McGlattery Brickworks in the Falls Road. All he wanted to do was put food on the table. He knew that you couldn't eat a flag. But the violence was going on all around us. And then in 1981, on the day that Bobby Sands died, nationalists formed a gauntlet at a place called Ardoyne and petrol bombed our bus, trying to kill us, trying to ignite us. And aged 14, I got off that bus, putting flames out because I was on fire. And I looked back up the road and I swore that I was going to get vengeance. Age 16, I enlisted into the British Army. The British Army is one army of the world out of 3 where you can join age 16. They recruit child soldiers, they still do. I completed my training and passed out to join my unit. I served for 10 years in the army. I served in places like Lebanon, the First Gulf War, Bosnia, and I did 5 tours back home in Northern Ireland. Joining at 16, my aim was relatively simple. I naively thought that I could get the best training possible and go back and take the war to the IRA. Obviously, that isn't how it panned out. In 1990, while in operations in Northern Ireland and the border in County Armagh, my uncle, Louis Robinson, a police officer, was kidnapped, abducted, and killed by the IRA. In 1994, I left the army, and coming from the tradition that I did, I entered politics and became the Ulster Unionist Party West Belfast constituency chairman. I also became the treasurer of the Ulster Young Unionist Council. I continued in politics through the Good Friday Agreement when, with the help of Senator George Mitchell and many Americans, we successfully negotiated the GFA. I stand by the Good Friday Agreement in its entirety. My singular regret is that this Good Friday Agreement has not been enacted in full. Since that period in 1997-98 in the peace process, and though I left public life and public politics, I have continued in business and I have continued trying to assist and support the peace process. And I would be well known as the chair of Veterans for Peace in Ireland for doing that, doing talks, assisting and working behind the scenes with other people, unsung heroes who were at the coalface of the conflict, to try push our peace process along, because peace in itself is not the finish. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. Next, Jack.
Yeah, I don't know how, can you hear me? Yeah, I don't know how I meant to follow that, but yeah, my name is Jack McGarry. I am from, and I say this all the time, and I'm glad to say it in this room, I hope my accent still sounds like I'm from Belfast, but I'm from Ardoyne in North Belfast, and I was born on the back end of the Troubles and into a very committed Irish Republican family. My father ran, and I know Mary's sitting here, so this will be the second run she's heard of this, so forgive the repetition, but my father ran for election for Sinn Féin with the tagline, fight back, vote Big Jack. Now, thankfully, he didn't. I'm glad he didn't get elected because I don't think he would have made a good politician. But yeah, he was on the first hunger strike when it was called off. He was about to go on to the second one when it was called off, and he was on the blanket. And my aunt was in the Antrim jail for north of I believe a decade as well. So. And I've had a family member who was killed by loyalist paramilitaries. That all being said, and to get to your point, when I was a kid, I didn't know any different. I thought that was entirely normal. And it wasn't really until the Good Friday Agreement, when there was a peace enacted, that things started to change for me, and I at that point wanted to become, and this is going to be crazy for a lot of you, I wanted to become the world's best bartender. Yeah. So as you can get from that last statement, I wasn't overly political or patriotic, and it wasn't really until I moved to New York and we opened the bar that I'm going to talk about in a second that happened. We opened a bar called the Dead Rabbit, which was a gang that was principally formed to protect and advance Irish immigrants that arrived on the docks and at the shores of America during and after the Great Hunger. So when we opened, our whole goal was to show, really to bring an Irish pub into the 21st century, because we were very frustrated with the representation of Irish culture in America. And what I mean by that is really poor representations of the Irish pub. They're not great, and they continue not to be great, so that's something that we hold dear. But over the past couple of years, we have really doubled down on it, and our focus really now is to walk the talk with the founding principles of the Dead Rabbit Gang in terms of protecting, advancing, championing and elevating contemporary Irish culture through all the mediums. So through the arts, through the culture, through the crafts, and you'll see that with the bar. And we're now beginning to scale the company into Austin and DC and other cities in furtherance of that mission. So that's a very short version of who I am and why I care greatly about a United Ireland.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Jack. So, Niall, you're next.
Again, I am also from Belfast, so I apologise if this panel begins to look like the Belfast show, but it's something that we're all very proud of as Belfast people. I'm from North Belfast as well, a couple of miles out from where Jack's from, a place called Glengormley. And really, what has me on the stage, Christine, is I am the secretary of an organisation called Ireland's Future. But to wind my own personal experience back ever so slightly, I also work as a solicitor in Belfast, and it has been my life's privilege to represent many families of those who have been bereaved as a result of the conflict in Ireland. And over the past number of decades, we have fought to ensure that their rights to truth recovery and what semblance of justice is available to them can be achieved through our courts. And in an obscene legislative action which came before our High Court in Belfast this week, the British government's retort to legal activism by families seeking access to justice was the Immoral Legacy Act, which effectively closes down access to justice. But it was through that activism, representing families such as the Loughlin Island families, that I came to America, and that I began to understand firsthand the importance of you, the importance of your agency in defining how we are treated at home. My frustration as a Northern nationalist is that certainly the British government, but at times the Dublin government, are reticent to uphold and ensure our constitutional objectives are cherished and honoured in alignment with the Good Friday Agreement. And it is only through the pressure and influence and activism from people like you in this room that the Dublin government do listen, that the London government do listen, and we very much appreciate and respect the responsible influence that people like you have in this room. And it was through the experience of Brexit that we observed how constitutional change should not occur. Brexit was motivated by lies, jingoism, racism, and we had a lifetime experience in how not to do it. And our organisation, Ireland's Future, and I'm delighted to be joined by our CEO, Gerard Carlisle, who has been conducting meetings all week, evangelising our message. We consider our mission to inform and infuse social discourse with empirical evidence. We don't want the debate around constitutional change to be sustained through inaccuracies or lies. We procure and publish research. We convene meetings like this. In Belfast, we've filled the Waterfront Hall, the Ulster Hall, the Three Arena in Dublin last year, 5,000 people, in what was one of the most electrifying experiences of my life. And we know that these events create change. Change doesn't happen by itself. People need to make change. And for all of the reasons that we consider the constitutional change is inevitable, electoral results, through the last 5 elections that unionism, to parliaments that unionism aspires to, the unionist majority, which had been inbuilt from the foundation of the state, has gone and is gone forever. The unionist majority is never ever coming back. And whereas religiosity is not a metric that I would propose should be appropriate or considered, it was the mechanism that the state was founded upon. On our last census result in 2021 recorded for the first time ever that there were more Catholics resident in our jurisdiction than Protestants. So for reasons of demographic change, for reasons of electoral evidence, we consider that there are inevitable movements towards the reunification of our island. And what we want to do is ensure that that debate is conducted responsibly, is conditioned by evidence, and that everybody has access to appropriate information in live time to make honourable and respectful decisions. We have published a document on Monday coming. We will publish a document, the pathway to 2030. It is our respectful analysis that there can be and will be a referendum wholly and exclusively in line with the Good Friday Agreement in 2030. And there are mechanisms that have to be engaged now. We've called on all of the political parties at our event in the Three Arena. We had the leaders of 5 political parties, 10 political parties in attendance, a mandate of over 2.2 million collectively. And we have stayed in touch, and we are presenting our respectful analysis to those parties, and we hope and trust that our views will find their ways into the manifestos of those parties. So really that's a very, hopefully short-cutted introduction to what we're trying to achieve.
Thank you, Niall, for that shortish explanation. So we do love Belfast, but now we're going to move south. So Ola.
Thank you, Christina. Gurmila Magi, Tushako Jasper showing you. It's really nice to be here today, and I'm here because of the Irish language and because of multicultural Ireland. This is the new Ireland. And that's something I want to get to a little bit later, but I want to give you a bit of my backstory. My name is Ola Majeko Dumi, and I'm a broadcaster, writer, and producer. I also sit on Board Forest La Gaeilge, which is a language body responsible for promoting the Irish language north and south of the island. And the Irish language is obviously should be anyway, very central to this debate. Some people might question, why is someone like me, a black woman, passionate about the Irish language? Well, because it actually did change my life. It changed the trajectory of my life. In 1997, my parents moved from Lagos, Nigeria to Ireland. I was born in Lagos, and we didn't have papers for about 9 years. I attended all Irish schools at a time that we were so vulnerable. We didn't even have documentation, but a leaflet made its way to where we were living, which was like a refugee accommodation. And my dad saw that leaflet and thought this would be an adventure for me. We were in such a vulnerable position because my older siblings had stayed in Nigeria. We didn't know whether we'd be staying in Ireland. We didn't know what the future held. But I guess the Irish language paved a new way of opportunities for me in my life. So I attended all Irish schools. I went to an all Irish primary school, Lislenog, just in Ranelagh in Dublin, and then I continued on to Coloshi Isagon in Stillorgan in Dublin. And you know, it's been a very interesting journey. It's been a very fruitful journey. I'm not going to say that it's been easy, because it has not been at all. I've had opposition to a person like me speaking Irish, and I don't know why, because it's the first official language of Ireland, and it should be open to anyone to speak. And that's changing in Ireland now. There are people of colour speaking Irish. There are people of immigrant background speaking Irish. One of my best friends is Brazilian, and she speaks such beautiful Irish, possibly one of the best kind of Irish speakers I've seen, to be honest. So this is the case in Ireland. Ireland is changing. And for me in my media work, you know, my kind of journey with Irish language wasn't something that I actually thought would happen, to be honest. You know, I was very interested in media work from school, and I knew that like Irish language would help me there. And I suppose along the way, people started being more interested in my ability to speak fluent Irish rather than my media work. But I'm very happy in terms of the conversations I've been able to have and the opportunities it has given me as well. And I just hope that it becomes more normalized that someone like me would be speaking Irish, because it is the country's language and it shouldn't be odd to speak it. And for me, it's not even that odd that someone like me would speak Irish, because I believe in decolonization. You know, I speak my own mother tongue. I speak my own mother tongue as well, Yoruba. And people need to start seeing the similarities between someone like me and a native Irish person. Nigeria was also colonized. You know, many other countries that, many people from different parts of the world that are living in Ireland now, their country was also colonized. So there's so much similarities between us all. And seeing the anti-immigration riot that happened in Dublin was really, really sad for me, especially for someone like me that grew up in Ireland, grew up in Dublin, sees Dublin as my home, many like me. And that just really hurts, that there would be a group of people, I know they're a minority, but they could become a majority if we're not careful of it. And it just hurts to see them espousing that kind of abuse. So we need to be mindful of that in this united Ireland, in this Ireland of equal opportunities, that everyone feels safe and everyone feels welcomed, because this is our future. You know, I'm hopefully going to have a family in Ireland as well, people like me too, and this is our home. So I just want Irish America to know that. I want people back home in Ireland to know that as well. And I think this is a beautiful way as well to start Seachtain na Gaeilge, which is Irish Language Week, in promoting the language and promoting multicultural Ireland too. So Gur Míle Mágaí.
Okay, wow, thank you. That was great. Sophie?
Thank you, Christine. Can you hear me? Yeah, you can hear me? Thank you so much, and what a tough act to follow. What an incredible! I feel so honoured to be on this panel with so many incredible people with incredible views. So my backstory is I'm not from Belfast. I'm from South Down, a wee place called Lisnacree, right at the Mourne Mountains. And oh, you can hear me now. Can you? I really don't want to be heard. Can you hear me now? My husband's in the audience and she never shuts up, and now you can't hear her on stage. So yeah, I'm from County Down, from South Down, and from the mountains of Mourne. I've been living in New York for, this summer will be 10 years. And I guess why I'm on the panel today is I am most likely a modern example of what Mary Lou has mentioned in her speech, like a current example of an Irish person who has emigrated away from Ireland but still feels very, very connected. So a little bit about my journey here in New York. I moved here in 2014 and I was immediately embraced by Irish America. I joined, the GAA here, my club's Manhattan Gales, I'll have to say in case there's anyone, Manhattan Gales is the best club in New York. So very much felt, buoyed by the Irish community that existed in New York. Shortly after my first year here, I was volunteering with P at a House, who I'm sure anyone at home from home will be familiar with, an incredible charity raising awareness for mental health and suicide, and they now operate here in the US as Solace House, and they've brilliant centres in Queens and the Bronx. And I was becoming part of the community, I guess, in every way I felt I could. I then was entered into the New York Rose of Tralee, so I was the New York Rose of Tralee in 2015. Thank you very much. I'm a bit wilted now, that was 8 years ago, but I say that because it had such a profound effect on my experience of New York and experience as an Irish person in America. It completely opened so many doors for me as an ambassador for Irish culture here. I went on, I was in Tralee obviously and did the whole thing, and it was a fabulous experience, and it gave me opportunity, including a visa, to come back to the US. And I could probably talk for an hour about visas, and a lot of people in the audience here will know the struggle and how much harder it's gotten, as well as our undocumented, of course. So I was given the opportunity to then really take a go after 1 year of being in New York, and in that time I worked at the American Irish Historical Society, which I'm sure, Christine, you are very familiar with, and some people with us in the audience. I was there for 4.5 years. And that, for me, I worked there in events and fundraising, but it was an eye-opening experience for me in terms of learning about the Irish in America and our history, and completely changed my point of view as coming from a native Irish person, not fully appreciating and understanding the weight of America on the Good Friday Agreement, as well as all the way back to the famine. So I got a real education by working there with and hearing from historians like yourself, our modern artists in New York who are Irish, our writers, our musicians, and for me it was a real sort of, it really was life-changing for me in terms of how I could see myself as part of the Irish American community, as opposed to just in the Irish diaspora, if that makes sense. So after a few years, I'm sure many people know here that it closed. I started a petition to reopen and stop the sale of the society with my colleague Brian McCabe, who's here. And, you know, again, when I asked, the Irish community answered and supported that petition so brilliantly, and we really were close to losing such an important part of our heritage here in New York. From then, I've been involved in a number of community initiatives with many people in this room who, you know, are just, I've learned so much from, and I'm so grateful to be associated with. But moreover, I have a podcast called Navigating New York. And the podcast was born from the experiences I've had as an Irish person in New York and the incredible people I've met. Jack has been on my podcast, and probably a few people here. And basically, the want for me to do that was to share the stories and the voices of current Irish immigrants in New York. And we talk about all sorts of different issues. One that constantly comes up is identity and our relationship to Ireland. The idea of home. Where is home whenever you're out in the diaspora? Where is home? Can you have two homes? And for me, my belief is, and my point of view is very much like, I feel at home here in New York because of the Irish that are here and have been here for decades and have paved the way for me. But I also am, you know, so passionate about being an ambassador for Ireland, and we are all ambassadors for Ireland. And I think, you know, one day I want to live in Ireland again, and I want that to be, I want that to be the Ireland that we promote, and that, you know, because sometimes I find we're really doing a good job at promoting Ireland in terms of tourism, our progressive, you know, all of the movements that have happened over the last few years. But in reality, and to Mary Lou's incredible speech earlier, like, it's the housing issues, it's the change that we need to see to make Ireland a destination for all of the incredible people that have left Ireland, to make it somewhere that we can get back to. So how was that for length?
Brilliant. Thank you. So you can see a very diverse panel, very brilliant panel. Back to Glenn, and this is for all of you. I know Niall has briefly referred to it, but Glenn, what do you think are the key steps to achieving an inclusive, united Ireland? And as a follow-up, is there a role for Irish America? And what is that role?
Okay. For me, the Good Friday Agreement allows for a border referendum. And when we negotiated the Good Friday Agreement, it was essential that that clause was there. But as someone who was there in the 94-98 period, I think we were caught up in the euphoria of peace, and we probably didn't dot so many I's and we didn't cross so many T's. It is up to the British Secretary of State to choose when a border poll can be called, and it's up to a British Secretary of State to outline what that vote will be. Now, what I mean is the characteristics of the vote. So, will it run like a Westminster election? Will it run like our elections for the Northern Ireland Assembly? Will it run in something else? Will 16-year-olds and above, given how we need, how this is really about the future of our children, will they be given a say in it? All of that is under the control of the Secretary of State. So for me, the first priority has to be ironing out those caveats. They are absolutely essential. The second thing is, and those of you who have heard me speak before, I'm 57 years of age. I have never had an Irish Republican back home or an Irish nationalist back home sit me down and say, Glenn, this is what a united Ireland will look like. Not one in the entire history of my life. It is essential that a government, an Irish government white paper is drafted that outlines the critical path, that change management to transition in the event of a successful border poll for Irish unity, which I'm absolutely convinced will happen. Is there a role for Irish America? Does a bear poo in the woods? Of course there is. Just as we couldn't have got the Good Friday Agreement through the door without the assistance of the United States and in particular Senator George Mitchell, the influence of Irish America is absolutely essential. But it's essential, I believe, in these early stages in the build up to 2030, in how lobbying takes place. Because we have, at the minute in the United Kingdom, there is a Tory party that is verging on outright fascism. And that government needs pressure put on it by America to honour its commitments in the Good Friday Agreement and to arrive at a policy document that outlines exactly how they propose what those caveats are. The other thing that needs clarified by the British government, and again, I want you to think about this. We know from the Good Friday Agreement that you can be British, Irish, or both. And while we assume that that is what will happen in a new Ireland, the reality is that the gift, for example, of British citizenship is not within the power of the new Irish government. So it is essential that the British government drafts up a white paper that also outlines how their critical path to change management. You know, now, I want you to think, and it's only one thing, but I'm getting old. You know, I'm 57. I've paid 40 years of tax and national insurance into the British Exchequer. Say New Ireland happens, who's going to pay my state pension? Do you understand what I mean? And these things are not within the gift of the Irish government, old or new. So, Irish America, we require serious lobbying from the United States to put pressure on the British government, whether that be a Labour government, whether that be a Tory government. I'm going to diversify here. George Galloway got elected in Rochdale last night. I don't know if any of you have seen his interviews, but he basically said that Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak were two sides of the same arse, two cheeks of the same arse. So regardless of it being a Labour government or a Tory government, we require Irish America's help to put pressure to get those caveats for what a border poll will be, when that border poll will be, and get that ironed out. We then need the British government's white paper that in the event of a successful border poll for Irish unity, where they see their obligations and commitments to people who would, at that time of transition, view themselves to be British, in inverted commas. But more importantly, it's about the fiscal and the economic and the legacy issues, and by legacy in this case I mean simply the ageing population, like myself, who will be looking to find out who is going to pay the pensions, where's that money going to come from. And finally, and I know I've gone on probably more than I should have, whenever again we did the Good Friday Agreement and we were caught up in that euphoria of peace, not one of us in Northern Ireland, whether it be myself who was in the talks team with the UUP, or Sinn Féin, or the SDLP at the time, none of us thought, who's going to pay for this? Not one. Not one of us thought, we need to send to Tony Blair, whoa, you're pumping billions into security here. We want that invested into our utilities, into bringing our infrastructure up to standard. Not one of us thought that. In a new Ireland, we will require American dollars. And we will require help to bring Northern Ireland into line with the advancing Republic of Ireland, because British government ain't going to fix our utilities. The British government ain't going to fix our infrastructure. So we need your help. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Glenn. Jack?
Yeah, I think Mary touched on it yesterday in terms of the issues of back home and the other. To your point, when the riots happened in Dublin on November 23rd, I was deeply concerned about the others on both the north and the south. So the others in the north being the Protestants who aren't for United Ireland or haven't been brought on board yet. What happens to them if they vote no and we get a United Ireland? Making sure that they're coming along with the right, or if it's Catholics or whoever. So I think we have to do a lot of work to make sure that the others in the north are brought along, but also there is, and I think we have to deal with the brutal facts of there is rising nationalism in the south, and there is a lot of people in the south that I think the south would concern me a lot as well in terms of the others. So Mary touched on it yesterday. Yeah, that would concern me, and I think we need to bring everybody or try to persuade everybody to join, to make the table as long as possible for a new Ireland. Because the new Ireland to me should be bold, it should be brave, it should charge into the future, and it should make the table longer. It should send the ladder back down again, as opposed to this isolationist fear mongering that we're starting to see in both the north and the south. So I'd say that would be the big thing for me. In terms of the Irish American community, I think it's huge. I think we're all hugely important. But to your point, it's what Irish American community is turning up. The Irish American community that I have experienced since I've come to this country is phenomenal. But again, confronting the brutal facts, there is a lot of Irish Americans whose political persuasion in America runs counter to the ideals of what I believe a new Ireland should be focused on. So I think there's a bit of cognitive dissonance between supporting for a new Ireland in Ireland, but then also allowing these the fear-mongering to propagate in America. So I think it's very important that the right Irish American community turns up, an Irish American community. Yeah, so just to finish up, so it's an Irish American community that is fully adopting the change and embracing the new Ireland. The new Ireland is not the Ireland of yesteryear. It's the Ireland of the people at this table. It's diverse. It's multifaceted, and all those people. Like, we need to know that that's what you're voting for, and that's what you're going with, because the New Ireland to me needs to be all of those things, and the new Irish American community needs to be all of those things too. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Okay, Niall?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, our organisation, Ireland's Future, published a document, or will publish a document this Monday called Ireland 2030. And in that document, we attempt to set out as explicitly as possible what governmental decisions need to be taken by which stage. So we really try to unfold a chronology of what we see as the pathway to a border poll, and it is our sincere, genuine belief that the conditions for a border poll will be met by 2030. We would seek that an Irish government convene a Ministry of State for reunification with the full staff and weight of a civil service, obviously a minister for reunification, and that may be an expansion of the current auspices of the Shared Island Unit, which I have to commend has committed exceptional funds as recently as last week. €800 million has been committed to be spent in our jurisdiction. That can only but be welcomed, but respectfully, we feel that more can and needs to be done. If we don't prepare, then we will fail, and it's the preparation that needs to be undertaken now. There are already intergovernmental mechanisms that can be engaged. There is a British-Irish governmental conference, and there is the wherewithal within that structure on an east-west basis to tease out some of the issues that require specificity. We need to know what conditions a British Secretary of State, and Glenn touched on this quite rightly, we need to know what are the criteria that he will apply that will be the trigger for a border poll. But the work that can be done on our side of the Irish Sea needs to happen, and needs to happen now. Civic assemblies can be set up to test the water, seek opinion, procure and publish evidence. In addition to what we would see as a ministry for reunification, there must be a publication, and Glenn's quite right, there needs to be a publication as to what the future will look like. And one of the things, and my friend Jerry Carlisle mentioned it in some meetings today, one of the things that we have heard from our friends, neighbours and work colleagues in the unionist community is that people in the South need to reach out and say, we want you to be part of a new Ireland. And that's not a message that is said enough or often. And that's something that we can all perhaps take home and embrace, because a new Ireland is going to be a new Ireland for everybody. It's going to be a home for my neighbours in the unionist community. It's their home too. I don't want a new Ireland to make any person feel uncomfortable or don't feel safe in their own identity or in their own security at home. So there needs to be that preparatory work that has to be commenced now if we are to achieve the objective for the reasons that I mentioned in my first remarks. Oh, thank you very much. Right on tune, if you can see this. This document really sets it out in some explicit detail. If I could just reflect on 2025 will be the year of elections. There are going to be a series of elections in both jurisdictions in 2025, and it is our hope and ambition that that will transform the political landscape and will become the impetus for what will be the decade of opportunity. This is our chance. How beautiful is it to be alive? Mary Lou touched upon it in her remarks. We are the generation that has the responsibility to give shape to this. That should enthuse and motivate every single person in this room. And the second half of the question is, what can Irish America do? Everybody in this room needs to be leaving this excellent day empowered, need to understand that this is the moment of change. We are the people that are going to change it. You are the people that have the ear of power. We need you to become engaged in the same spirit that 1985 to 1988 was, because we are in that momentum of change again. We need to see the spirit of General Jim Cullen, some of these magnificent people that I have had that we all have had the privilege to know and understand, but we need it to happen again now. The Good Friday Agreement was not the end stop of the destination. It was a stop on the way to the destination. It gave us the power to achieve what is our responsible aim and objective, which is a united Ireland by 2030.
Ola?
I feel like the panel have already really answered this really well, but I suppose for me, I think it's education. You know, why should there be a united Ireland? I feel like a lot of people in the South, especially from middle class backgrounds, are so disengaged with it. Like, I've spoken to friends about it from that background, and they just don't really care, which is not good enough. And it's beyond just patriotic reasons. There are opportunities for it as well. And just in terms of just decolonisation too, you know, that needs to be talked about more in schools, I think. You know, I remember when I was studying for my Leaving Cert, which is the kind of final exams in Ireland, that we studied like the Irish language curriculum, and there was a poem called Philarish by Sean O'Riordan. And I thought that was so passionate as a poem, Philarish, kind of returning to your own. And that got me thinking even about my own cultural background, you know, my own language, Yoruba. And I just think there should be more material like this in schools in Ireland, like just getting people to connect to their identity. There isn't enough of that. Like, people are very disengaged, and that's not only in Ireland, like, it's everywhere that's been colonised. So whatever I suppose we can all do to continue to debate, educate one another, and also bring people along as well, because I think a lot of people of colour or from an immigrant background feel disengaged from this debate as well. And that shouldn't be the case, because we're all going to be in this new Ireland, and we should make it better for everyone. So it's about bringing people along and just making it open as well, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Ola. Sophie?
Thanks, Christine. Yeah, I echo everybody's sentiments on the panel. My sort of hopes for a new Ireland are, I really enjoy the way it's phrased as end of partition, because I think that shows exactly what it would mean to so many people, both in the north, like mostly in the north, but in terms of like, I think it has to be rephrased, because to Ola's point there, I think there's a huge group of people, and Niall, you mentioned this term earlier when we had a chat about sort of southern partition, I think is what you called it. And it's, I think because, and to your point, Glenn, about the euphoria of peace, we've been, for like over a decade, had so much peace, and I think we've actually lost the engagement of quite a number of my age category. Because it hasn't been front page news all the time, and I think that there's a lot of work to be done in recapturing the sort of age that like 30s, 20s to 40s maybe. I think there's a huge gap there in terms of like, even when you then bring it over to the part of, well, I'll finish this question first. What I see for a new Ireland is an opportunity to promote Ireland on this global stage that we'll have given ourselves for being this incredibly progressive country. And I think our like values as a culture historically, and that we've seen more recently, have, you know, will take center stage. And, you know, I was talking to my husband about this earlier, and like he made a really good point about when you look at like even sport in Ireland, like if you think of the Irish rugby team, like a united Irish team, how much they've done on the world stage. Like when we are one, we are so much more powerful. And I think there's I think obviously coming from the north, I have, you know, this very deep-seated want for a united Ireland, and it's almost, some might call that romanticized, and I understand and recognize that. But I think, given all of the information we've even shared today, like the opportunity that ending partition gives us, like for our economy, for our arts, for our creatives, for our diaspora, is huge. And again, there's a seat at the table for everyone. And again, we will be flying the flag in a time in America, in the world, where things are so hard to kind of understand. I think Ireland can really lead the way in that regard. So, and then in terms of how Irish America will have a role to play, I think it's huge. When we look at the Good Friday Agreement, you mentioned Senator George Mitchell, the various groups represented here today that fought hard to make the Good Friday Agreement possible. And again, I think there's just been this little lag ever since in engaging the Irish diaspora because, again, we've had the euphoria of peace, and I think that the role I would imagine myself and my sort of colleagues or friends would take is one of engaging that new Irish, that cohort in America, because I think what New York does is it really brings out this, and being away anywhere, I guess, brings out this sense of such pride of where you're from, and we have the benefit of being able to zoom out of Ireland and see what, I've become, I don't know about anyone else in the room who's from Ireland, but way more patriotic since I left home. I'm like St. Bridget, walking around New York. And I'm learning Irish, Ola. I'm trying to get my couple of folklore back, but it's incredible the ambassadors that we have across so many industries. Jack, for example, there's so many people in the room here in construction, in the arts, in finance, who have really impressive journeys that they've completed here, because not only because of they're Irish, but because New York brings out this, and America brings out this sense of confidence and possibility that unfortunately in Ireland we don't see at this point, or have seen over the past 10 years. We haven't seen that opportunity. So I think there's a huge role that Irish America will play, like it has done historically. And I think as well, I just would like to take the opportunity to say that I think there is a real fear and a risk, and I've always tried to be conscious of it, of becoming a bit desensitized to things when moving away from home and moving to a country as vast as America, where politics are so important in culture. Like, as Irish people and Irish Americans, we have so many brilliant facets of who we are. I think it's important to stay engaged in the Irish community and the Irish American community as a whole, because it's easy to get lost in other ideals that don't line up with our values as Irish people. Like, I was talking to Jack earlier and everyone on the panel about what's happening in Palestine and the parallels in starvation and denying humanitarian aid. It doesn't matter what the argument is. I think we are all here and we're all a product of that happening in Ireland, especially in New York and the Northeast. So I just think it's really important that we stay connected to the values that we have as a historic culture, but also today.
Thank you. That reminds me, some years ago, President Mary Robinson, talking about the famine in Somalia, said we as Irish people have a duty to intervene because we have an informed consciousness. It literally is in our DNA, so thank you for bringing that up. Glenn, you raised the question that no nationalist Republican had explained to you what a united Ireland would look like. I think Niall and Jack sort of started, but would you like them to tell you a bit more? 2 minutes. Yeah. Yep, they're going to tell you what a united Ireland, and then I'm going to come back to you and ask you what you would like a united Ireland to look like. So it's a 2 minute though each. Niall, I'll start with you.
Well, the opportunity for synergy across so many departments, I think the greatest gift that a new nation can present to itself will be a national health service, free from the point of access, from cradle to grave, melding the best that both services currently provide and addressing the shortfalls that unfortunately exist in both services. I personally have had a very close engagement with the NHS at home after my last time in New York, I should say. Hopefully I don't become as ill when I go home this time. But I appreciate the value of critical care and nursing. And when I left hospital, I was struck not only by the humanity of the nursing care that I received, but how undervalued they are in our society. And that was during a pandemic, and I can recall that 2 months prior, nurses had actually gone on strike, withdrawn their services, not for increased wages, but for safe staffing levels, so that patients would be safe. They were looking pay parity with nurses in England, Wales and Scotland, and within 2 months, they were the first responders. They were the firemen running into the World Trade Center at our hour of need. And we didn't look after them, much to our society's shame. We didn't look after them. There is the opportunity for a new, synergised, single national health service. You know, why when I look at the border, my wife is from Ballick in South Fermanagh, and her auntie was enduring end-of-life care, and whereas she should have been able to access the care at McGilvin, she had to travel to Sligo. The opportunity for a single unified health service, especially in the northwest and Donegal, really does provide us with a blueprint to be the best, to have the best. It's what we deserve. It's what our taxes pay and can afford. When you look at education, the disparity and the weaknesses that some aspects of northern society have to endure isn't fair. It's not right. And there's an opportunity to reimagine the best opportunity for access to education for every tier of society. So the opportunities are endless. I think that a new and united Ireland provides us with not a blank blackboard, but it's an opportunity to enhance and synergise the best of what both jurisdictions have to offer.
Okay, I think I have to cut you off there,
Sure.
simply because I know I will be cut off. So, Glenn, have you anything? How would you envisage a united Ireland, a new united Ireland?
Just for clarity, when I said that no one had ever presented me what the roadmap was, it doesn't mean that I'm not a New Irelander. I very much am. I'm Irish. I'm a Republican. But because of our recent period of conflict, I actually still find it difficult to say I'm an Irish Republican. But I am. I really, really am. How do I see a New Ireland going? Thank you. Without getting into the details, there are good aspects of public services and governance in Northern Ireland, the existing Northern Ireland, and there are good aspects of public services and governance in the existing jurisdiction called the Republic of Ireland. Both those states, as we know, were created at partition. I call them the two bastard states. One, the North, we all know about, committed to marching rights. But very few people talk about the problems in the South, which was a state committed to religious rights. And the fact that, say, for example, my Protestant trade unionist grandfather would have had real fears about the influence of the Catholic Church in that state's apparatus. Now, the Republic is moving forward leaps and bounds, but that old stuff is still there. So what do I hope? I hope that we take the best parts of what is currently in Northern Ireland, we throw that in as the hardcore, I hope that we take the best parts of what is currently in Southern Ireland, it gets thrown in as the hardcore, and that together, Catholic and Protestant and dissenter, we work together, collaboratively, capacity building, to create something that none of us have never had. And that is a country that we can call our own.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, that's powerful. Our time is almost up, so I'm going to ask you all in one sentence to say what you would like the audience to take away from our panel meeting today. Sorry, I'll start with Niall and come along, if that's okay. Niall?
One sentence. We are in a momentum of change. We are the generation that can shape a new Ireland, and we all have to leave here today understanding the reality and with the energy to make that happen.
Thank you. Jack?
For me, it would be getting away from being fearful and moving to being fearless about the future. This is longer than one sentence, but I'm extremely impassioned and committed to a new Ireland, and I think the prospects of a new Ireland are incredible, you know, and I think we just need to charge into it.
Thank you.
It's difficult to put it in one sentence, but Ireland is changing in all kinds of ways, and let's embrace it together.
Sophie?
I would say keep an open mind, and in terms of Irish America, we each have a responsibility to encourage other people to have an open mind about what the future of Ireland can be.
Thank you.
You are your actions. Rather than 1,000 words of waffle, is one action, demonstrable action, that will bring about Irish unity. You in this audience are your actions.
Okay. Thank you all. I started by mentioning Frederick Douglass. I'm going to end by quoting something he said when he was in Dublin, 1845. He said to an Irish audience, "Agitate, agitate, agitate." And I think that's a good lesson for today. Thank you for being such a brilliant, warm, responsive audience, and thank you for being such an honest panel. That was very enlightening. So thank you all.
Right, sir. Good morning. Thank you. All right, Greg. Brilliant.
So who knew there was so much diversity in Ireland? What a great panel discussion. Give it to him again. Give him a round of applause. That was awesome. So we still have a couple more panel discussions, but before we get there, we're going to hear from a couple more of our sponsors. I'd like to bring up to the stage now the president of the Irish American Unity Conference, Peter Kissel. Peter?
Better pull this out so I know what I'm going to say. Yeah, as Marty mentioned, I'm Peter Kissel. I'm privileged to serve as the national president of the Irish American Unity Conference. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the IAUC, but first I want to also thank Friends of Sinn Féin, and in particular Greg O'Loughlin, for putting this wonderful event together. Took a lot of organizing. And I'd also like to acknowledge and thank our fellow sponsoring organizations, the Brehon Law Society, AOH, LAOH, the Friendly Sons and Daughters of St. Patrick and the James Connolly Labor Coalition, because together we show the strength of Irish America. This is a message that we're delivering today. And it's not coincidental that it's 150 years after John Devoy kick-started the American agitation movement. And we are here today stronger than ever, showing that we will never give up until Ireland is free from the tip of the south to the very north. And so I just want to say how much I and our organization enjoys working with other organizations that are here today. The IAUC was formed in 1983, so we don't have the ancestral lineage or the vintage of some of our fellow organizations here today. We're formed for the sole purpose. We are unique in this sense. Our sole mission is the unification of Ireland, advocating for the unification of Ireland. And part of that mission, of course, involves making sure there is justice and peace in Ireland, and in Ireland now as well as into the future. I will touch a little more on what we do as an organization in a few minutes, but one thing Greg asked us to do today is to talk about the importance of Irish unity. Why is it important? I always think of the quote, one of my favorite quotes from one of Derry's own sons, a cultural Catholic, as Brendan would have it, who was born in Derry in Bellaghy. And of course, all of you know who Seamus Heaney is. One of my favorite quotes from one of his poems is, "I'll have you know my passport's green. No glass of ours was ever raised to the Queen." And we need unification for a number of reasons. I don't have time to go into them all, but I will list a couple. One is to end discrimination against the Irish by the British, against Catholics by the British. We need to get justice and equal treatment. I grew up watching Bull Connor's dogs tearing apart black people in the South. And I swore when I learned about what's going on in Northern Ireland that I would try to do something about the same situation up north. And that has gone on and on. Britain's discrimination has gone on way too long. They have ignored the GFA, their obligations. Not long ago, they barred Mary Lou MacDonald from an all-parties meeting, a so-called all-parties meeting on about the Stormont government. They've held secret talks with the DEUP to figure out what Stormont ought to look like when the DUP goes back into it. From the Canova report this week, we found out there's going to be no prosecutions. Not a big surprise, but it's another reminder of just how abused Ireland is by the British government. And one of my favorite personal examples is that the British so-called Parliamentary Undersecretary of State for Northern Ireland, Jonathan Kane, wrote me a letter this summer in response to a letter I'd sent to Sunak, in which he breathtakingly said, "The Amnesty Act was enacted against a backdrop in which traditional criminal justice outcomes, such as prosecutions, are vanishingly rare." How about that for arrogance? They have delayed justice for 50 years. They're vanishingly rare because of an unstated but firm policy of the British government that they're not going to allow criminal prosecutions. Now they've found that criminal prosecutions are in fact going forward, and so they try to slam the door shut with the Amnesty Act. In my mind, there are basically three types of British categories of British people who are the problem. The first one, of course, is the broad population, and they're simply benign. They don't give a hoot about the north of Ireland. The second group are the aristocratic politicians, whom I like to call the Etonians. And they like to use the north of Ireland as their little political football to pretend they've still got an empire going. But the worst grouping of all, and my apologies to Glenn Radley, is the military and the security forces, the British Army, MI5 and MI6. And Brendan O'Leary alluded to this in some of his remarks. the British military have a so-called policy forum, a military think tank. And a month ago, this policy forum issued a report saying, quote, Ireland is a backdoor threat to British security. And their spokesperson, former Security Minister Lord West, said, and I'll read this slowly because it's chilling. He said that the British government should expand air and naval presence in the north of Ireland. Of course, he said Northern Ireland. He said that our bases in Northern Ireland are even more. Must be 4 minutes. They know. Can you hear me now? Said is that bases in Northern Ireland are even more crucial now because of the so-called Russian Grey War. Now, if that doesn't tell you the military is not about to let loose its grip on the north of Ireland, I don't think anything tells us. So what do we do for activism? Real quickly, the IAUC is very, very involved, particularly in engaging Congress and our government and Northern Ireland people, including the Irish government as well. We meet regularly with Congress. I'm based in Washington, D.C. I work regularly with a lot of people on Capitol Hill. Our board and other members came into Washington last fall, and we had a series of meetings with the Friends of Ireland members. And we also met, which we felt very good about, with the Irish ambassador, Geraldine Byrne-Nason, to impress upon her how important it would be to get the Irish government to challenge the Amnesty Act in a lawsuit. She was, I won't say she was encouraging because she's a very, very, very smart diplomat, very well respected, but I came out of that meeting, and I think a lot of our members did, feeling pretty good as we could, that we got a very, very sympathetic ear from the ambassador. And so that is the sort of thing that we do. We have meetings with Irish leaders. We've met a number of times, of course, with Mary Lou and with Kieran, but also with Niall Murphy, with Monica McWilliams. We were one of the first groups to welcome, I think the first group actually, to welcome the Ballymurphy families to Washington, D.C., and we ushered them around Congress when they started their campaign in America, I don't know, 10, 12, 15 years ago. The other thing we do, real quickly, because I know Marty's looking at me, is we write a lot of letters and articles to newspapers, to the New York Times, to the Washington Post, to the Irish Echo, to the Irish Gazette. And even when, and we have a lot published, but even when they're not published, I remember the words of Michael Cummings, one of our longtime members, who said, it still is worth educating people by writing letters because people in those newspapers read those letters, and it's important to educate those people in the media as well as it is the American public. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Before we have the musicians play another song, I want to bring out another one of our sponsors. John Murphy is an international representative with the Plumbers Union. He will speak on behalf of the James Connolly Irish American Labor Coalition. John?
Good afternoon. The cause of labor is the cause of Ireland, and the cause of Ireland is the cause of labor. My name is John Murphy, and I'm an international representative with the United Association of Plumbers, Pipe Fitters, and Sprinkler Fitters in the United States and Canada. And I am proud to stand before you in this moment in time as one of the many union leaders of the James Connolly Irish American Labor Coalition, and in honor of the memory of the great Rita O'Hare. For those of us that were blessed to know her understood that Rita was a force of nature. Our members believe in a united Ireland, and we believe that in this moment, the prospect of a united Ireland is not only credible, but it's inevitable. As First Minister O'Neill has said, we are in a decade of opportunity. How do we do our part to achieve Irish unity? Well, Rita O'Hare was the driving force behind mobilizing the labor movement here in New York to educate our members and engage our elected officials to support a united Ireland. Labor unions can organize and mobilize like no others. It was the labor movement who mobilized to elect supporters of Irish unity to Congress like Tom Suozzi. It will be the labor movement that will mobilize to get Senator Tim Kennedy seated in Congress. The James Connolly Irish American Labor Coalition will do its part to make this vision of a united Ireland a reality. In the words of another Irish American labor leader named George Meany, labor never quits. God bless the United States of America, and God bless a united Ireland. Thank you.
All right. Ready for our next panel discussion? So in an environment where there's political discourse and very little room for agreement, we have with us today two elected officials, one from New York State and one from Massachusetts. And as you've seen in the past, the one thing that the Republicans and Democrats can agree on in D.C. is what needs to happen in Ireland. They've always been supportive. So please welcome the Senator from New York State, Tim Kennedy, and Representative Hannah Kane from Massachusetts. Where are you comfortable? All right, brother. So, we have a half hour to discuss politics, and it's not going to be U.S. politics for the most part. But why don't you guys introduce yourselves? Hannah, you came down from Massachusetts today. Tell the people here a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I am a state representative in the central part of Massachusetts. I'm a Republican. I am originally from Maine, where I grew up having Senator George Mitchell as my senator, and have lived in Massachusetts for about 27 years. My great-grandfather emigrated to the United States at the age of 14 when his father said to him, "You have a choice to be a farmer or a priest," and he chose neither. He boarded a boat and came to the U.S., and I had the good fortune to be one of the legislators this past August to go back to Ireland to celebrate the signing of the Good Friday Agreement. And for me, it was also very special because my good friend Claire Cronin, a former colleague of mine, is the U.S. Ambassador to Ireland. So it was a very special moment to be there with her. And my husband Jim is here. His family is from County Mayo. My family was from County Meath, and we have 3 beautiful children who are also connected to our family from Ireland. Each of them shares a name that comes directly from Ireland. So I'm happy to be here today.
And we're happy to have you. Thank you, Hannah.
Tim.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah.
Even though this is your home state?
Yeah, it's great to be home. It's always good to be in the great state of New York. First of all, Marty, thank you. Hannah, it's great to see you. What a wonderful day. Hasn't this been extraordinary? Just an amazing day here. The first day of Irish Heritage Month. It's been declared by President Joe Finnegan Biden. We're very excited about that. It's always wonderful to see Mary Lou McDonald, and I'm just inspired by all of the incredible panelists that have been a part of this today. I'm born and raised in Buffalo, New York. I'm sorry to tell some of you, but I'm excited to announce the capital of Irish America, for those of you that didn't know. Sorry, New York and Chicago and Boston, but we claim it. Our great friend Marcino Mueller, as many of you know, up in Belfast, a former Lord Mayor, once came to Buffalo and declared it because of the Irish Heritage District and the great history there of the Fenians invading Canada back in 1866. He said, "God, this is the capital of Irish America." I said, "I'm stealing that, and nobody's taking it back." So just really happy to be here. Every time I come to the great city of New York, I'm reminded what an amazing history we have here. And it was the Irish that helped to build this wonderful city. And it was the Irish that helped to build this incredible democracy and fought for the creation of this democracy back to the revolutionary days. And then after building this city, created this wonderful and extraordinary country of ours. And so my family came over during the famine. And, it was the 1840s and 50s that the McCarthys and the Flynns and the O'Donohues and the Kennedys came through Scranton and came through Canada, quite frankly, through the Toronto area and settled into Buffalo. And as the Erie Canal was built 200 years ago and made New York City the metropolis, the great metropolis that we know it to be, Buffalo and all of these upstate cities were born as canal cities, and Buffalo being the western terminus was where so many Irish came to reside. So hence, that's where I come from, and I'm proud of my Irish heritage, as we all are, and I'm really honored to be here as a part of this panel today. So thank you.
Thank you. So in my opening remarks today and throughout, I mentioned in 1918, after World War I, Congress convened a hearing on the Foreign Affairs Committee on the Irish question. That's what it was called, the Irish question. And it was to determine what to do about Irish freedom, independence, and the right to self-determination. And we know what happened at that point. President Wilson punted it and let the Brits decide what's going to be the future of Ireland. So you're both here today. What do you see as different 106 years later?
Everything is different. Everything is really different. And I mean, I think when you look at the more recent history, you've seen a strong commitment from the United States of America to the peace process. Obviously President Clinton felt so strongly that he sent George Mitchell to be part of the process of helping to bring everyone together and find a path forward. But you've seen subsequent presidents too, and certainly President Joe Biden has shown an incredible support for moving forward. And certainly with his appointments through his U.S. Ambassador Claire Cronin, the Special Envoy Joe Kennedy to Northern Ireland. In Congress, you have incredible leaders. Congressman Richie Neal, who comes from Massachusetts. He's been here. Sits on Ways and Means, is very powerful, and always has Ireland at the forefront of his mind. And certainly we've had, the Lion of the Senate, Ted Kennedy, and the late Congressman Brian Donnelly. So we've had much more commitment, I think, visible commitment from the United States in more recent history than the turn of the century. But I also think, here we've heard from so many people today. I love the last panel and their contributions to the conversations. The folks here who are in this country, it is so easy to go back to Ireland today. I think about when our relatives came over, they never got to go back. They came here and they set their families up and they lived their lives. We have the ability to go back and forth. My husband and I went for 2 weeks on our honeymoon because that's where our families were from. And so I think you have a relationship with the diaspora here, which is different than it was in that period of time. And I think because of that, there's a much more stronger commitment across the political spectrum. I will also say today the work that's being done, Senator Mark Daley, who has worked really hard to set up the American Irish Legislative Caucuses. We took 200 legislators over to Ireland and Northern Ireland in August. And we all brought that back to our districts and we talk about it with constituents. And so there's ways to keep it at the forefront of people's minds today in a way that I think there wasn't in the past. And certainly in 1916, there was so much going on in the world. I think there was probably a calculated effort on why not to fight as strongly for Ireland. But I think today we're in a very different place, and the commitment to the peace process is strong. And the questions earlier about will America be here? We will certainly be here. We will be strong allies in moving this forward.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything that Representative Kane said. The world is a different place today than it was 106 years ago in every way. But I think what has really determined the direction that the United States goes has been the perseverance of the Irish people for a united Ireland. And the Good Friday Peace Agreement that was signed now 26 years ago this year really set in place a model for peace across the world, and a model that the United States not only was a part of in, assisting to make happen, but has bolstered by our commitment to seeing it through. And that's not just a peace in the day, from the day it was signed, it's every day forward. And it's leaders like Mary Lou McDonald and Michelle O'Neill and those that are now power sharing for the first time in history that are really showing the world that it can be done. It can be done, and it will be done, and they're doing it. And so the United States has an obligation to work with Ireland to make sure that that peace is a lasting one in perpetuity, and to think about where the nation of Ireland has come from, not just through the struggles of the last 100 years, but over the course of many centuries to get to this point. And now we have an opportunity to have an impact on lasting peace in a unified Ireland forever. I think that's an incredible moment in history. I'm really excited for all of us to be able to witness it. I think we all feel that same way, that we can witness this moment in history, that God's blessed us with this moment, being a part of this time. But also, again, I said an obligation, and I mean that word. The United States has an obligation to make sure that we see it through.
Very good. So, Hannah, you mentioned Senator Mitchell, and we actually did a 15th anniversary right here, and Senator Mitchell was our speaker, and what he did was just incredible. And I had the pleasure to meet him on several occasions. Very warm, a great listener, and he said that was the key. But the other thing that struck me, during the negotiations for the Good Friday Agreement, he had to fly home because his son was born, Andrew, right? He left, flew home to be with his wife, to see their child born. And he says in his book, you know, I hope when I come back with my son someday, I'm going to sit in Stormont, and he's going to say, Daddy, I'm bored, I want to go home. Because that means they're governing. So, and I know both of you have children. You know, Glenn said he's 57, I'm 60. We heard Niall Murphy talk about 2030. Where do you see the process for your children in the future and when they go back to Ireland?
Sure. Well, I really resonated with what Sophia said earlier about there is a sort of what I would call a generational gap in the understanding of the troubles and the difficulty versus now. And I think part of that, certainly talking about it generationally in Ireland is important, but it's important here in the US too. I mean, I grew up understanding, because I lived in that period of time. I grew up with U2 singing Bloody Sunday, Bloody Sunday, Bloody Sunday. It was very much part of the landscape of growing up for me. It hasn't quite been the same for my kids who are 23, 21, and 18. So we spend a lot more time talking about it as a family and what it means, and also making sure they understand that the commitment to Ireland, because that is where our family is from. But I think moving forward, it really is this generation that is going to complete this process and see a united Ireland. So it's, you know, on the one hand, we have to make sure they have enough information and connection to what has happened in the past, but really to just invade with this positive notion that we're moving forward, we're moving ahead. When I was in Stormont in August and I sat there, if you didn't know the history, you might not have guessed that's what the history was. It was really kind of an interesting juxtaposition of understanding how far we've come. But as I sat there listening to the 5 political parties talking about where they were at in the current stalemate, it was 5 political parties talking about where they were in the current political stalemate. And that was actually really good. You know, there's always going to be political issues that have to be dealt with and a difference of perspective on policy. But it felt very much like everyone was moving forward. There was no one trying to move backwards.
Yeah, you know, I agree with Representative Kane. Again, you know, we come from a different generation that was engaged in what was happening overseas because it was the Troubles. And you were reading about it every day in the papers and various publications, and hearing about it and hearing our families talk about it and to be a part of it. And when those, we all know this, when those sort of things are happening, it pulls you together. And that was passed down to us, not just from our parents, but our grandparents and all of our ancestors going back to when they came off of those ships. And what's interesting about today is that if you don't teach history, it'll be lost. And we have to make sure that the next generation of Irish and Irish Americans understand what their parents and grandparents and forefathers and mothers had to go through, the struggle to get them to this point today. I was out just last week after an Irish Echo event down here. I try to get down here as often as I can.
Where the money is.
For as many Irish events. But you know where I ended up? At the Dead Rabbit. I was looking for Jack McGarry earlier. At the Dead Rabbit with a whole bunch of folks, and we were chatting with some young ladies that, 24 years old from Belfast. And they're peace babies, they're called, right? Peace babies. And, you know, they have a different view of the world. And isn't it a beautiful thing? It's a beautiful thing to see this generation growing up in peace. And we have to teach our children, and my wife and I have 3 children, 18, 15, and 12. And we really impress upon our children the struggles that our ancestors had to go through to give them the life that they have today. And I think that's a big part of what we have to do, is ensure that we're teaching our history, we're educating our children and future generations so that these stories of struggle aren't lost, and that passion for Ireland, and ultimately a united Ireland, isn't lost on both sides of the pond.
So you talk about the peace babies, and I guess, you know, relatively, well, I don't want to insult anybody. I'll just go with my age. You know, I'm of that generation where it was 1981, Bobby Sands. We did a lot of mock funerals here in Manhattan. We did a Bobby Sands run up at Gaelic Park. That's how I got involved. I was a junior in high school and remained involved. And I feel that, you know, today, especially with younger people, they're disengaged because, you know, back then it's easy to be involved, right? There's an injustice, like Israel and Gaza today. Everybody wants to get involved. Their attention's drawn to that. But now the hard work begins, right? So what is it that's going to take? And I'd like to hear from both the personal and political point of view, given where you are. And Tim, if I haven't mentioned, is running for Congress. He has a special election in April. What's it going to take to keep Irish America engaged? I mean, we've had our obstacles and detractors over the years, right? I remember even with the Good Friday Agreement, it was fits and stops and fits and stops, and it went on and on and on, and we never thought we'd get to where we are. And as I said in my opening comments, Michelle O'Neill is the First Minister in Stormont today. So talk to us. Tim, I'll start with you, in terms of both your political and personal perspective of how we keep people engaged here in the United States.
We have to talk about it, and we have to pull people together like this Irish Unity Forum, just an extraordinary day today, where, you know, we shouldn't end the conversation here. This should be the beginning of a conversation as we celebrate St. Patrick's Month, right? So, you know, we have to make sure that we're getting out there, we're moving around. You know, I try to get to Ireland at least once a year, depending on what I'm going for, typically government issues, you know, but, you know, we were just there in October for a conversation on the Good Friday Agreement. I spoke on a panel at DCU, but before the Wednesday forum, I traveled up to Belfast and went to, with some friends, Dan Dennehy I know is here, you know, went to the Irish language school and spoke with the folks in the community. The struggle continues. None of this is easy. And we cannot say just because there's the peace that it's going to happen on its own. We have to be a part of the conversation. We have to make sure that we're holding those accountable. It was mentioned you know, earlier in a number of different panels that the United States Congress has to make sure that we hold the government accountable to ensuring that this referendum is ultimately called and that the people decide the fate of the future of Ireland. And we know, based upon polling, that a united Ireland will happen if a referendum comes to a vote in our lifetime. And so this is exciting times. But, you know, personally, I think we have to tell the history, but we have to also make our own history. So, you know, improving our economies. We have so many shared interests between all of Ireland and the economic engine of all of Ireland, but particularly in the north. If you look at some of the communities that have gone through the struggles and are rebounding, and we have to play a part from our government perspective in infusing dollars where we can and infusing energy where we can into great cities like Belfast and Derry and the other surrounding areas that, you know, had struggled for so long and had seen folks and companies running away. Buffalo was much like that. You know, we are a community that was built on the Great Lakes economy and the economy of the Erie Canal, but, you know, once a different economy began and, you know, you had a world economy take shape, Buffalo and many of these upstate cities saw a depression. And that's why I got involved in politics to begin with. For 70 years, there was a depression out in the western part of the state, but we're rebounding. There's a resurgence, unlike ever before, much like the north of Ireland. So connecting our great communities, playing a part in telling our shared history, our shared stories, connecting each other and our families and our futures. I think that's a big part of what we can do in making sure that the future generations, like our children, and ultimately our grandchildren, know what it took, again, to get to this point.
And Hannah, I'm going to ask you to answer the same question, but I want to throw a little something else on it. We had about 7 or 8 organizations here today, Irish American organizations sponsoring. How important is that as an elected official if they come to visit you?
Oh, it's very important. You know, and again, I'll go back to the mission that legislators took in August. There were 44 states represented in Ireland, 180 legislators. And we spent a day in Northern Ireland at Stormont and a day in the Irish Parliament. And it was designed that way, again, to educate us as legislators on what are the current issues on the ground and how we can support this process. And we're talking about going back now every year because we want to visually show our support for this process. I think Mary Lou was right earlier on today when she spoke about the fact that
We've been hearing that a lot today.
What?
We've been hearing that a lot today. Mary Lou's been right.
No, but you know, there's an opportunity to meet this moment, right? Like you want to build on this momentum that's here. You want to be cognizant of the fact that there's a lot going on in the world and there's a lot of other things that can take precedence as they happen. So this needs to be at the forefront, but there also needs to be concrete planning for this. If we're going to meet the moment and we're going to have people buy into it, they need to understand exactly what it's going to look like. And so I think that's the work that needs to be done now. And I think, again, that is the way that we here in the States can support that process. There's many ways in that we can help engage not only directly in Ireland, but also with you know, the government in the UK to say that let's begin to have this dialogue on how a unified Ireland will look. And I don't think we should undersell the challenge of that work. Not that it's insurmountable, I don't mean it to be that way, but there's a lot of work to be done to figure out, you know, after this vote occurs, how everyone moves forward. And I think people are going to be looking for certainty. You know, they might, in their heart, want to vote for this, but they need to understand it in their head. And so that is work that we, I think, in the United States can also help and support as you move forward to being a united Ireland.
And I think that's important too, right? You talk about stability and peace, but you also need economic stability, right? Glenn brought up an excellent point. You know, at the time that the Good Friday Agreement was being negotiated, the Brits were spending billions of dollars on security. They could have just said, hey, listen, this is the route we're going to go now. Take that money and build an economy here in the north and do what you need to do to get things right. And that didn't happen. It was a missed opportunity. So, you know, we're talking about the Irish issue, but there's economic issues that are tied into it as well. So, you know, if either one of you want to add to that in terms of your relationships and with businesses and bills that get passed, and budgets that get passed. How much of this gets weighed in?
You know, I think people rely on government for the nuts and bolts of it, right? I mean, a lot of the former mayor of Boston, Tom Menino, always said it's about, you know, how many potholes you have on your street, right? This is what people every day. I thought the question that was raised earlier about, you know, where is my pension coming from? Who's funding that? How's that going to work? That's what people want to understand in their practical day-to-day life. But I think, again, on a higher level, you know, there are such great reason to have a united Ireland and to talk about some of those issues in terms of, you know, what it means from an economic development prowess of, you know, the island. I mean, it's certainly a large trading partner for us here in the United States, but I think it bodes well for Ireland's future and in terms of the people living in Ireland, the ability to, again, find a career path that works for them. Certainly the housing issue. I'm in Massachusetts right now. We have incredibly high housing costs. We're working on that as well. It's not something that is just a problem in Ireland. But a lot of the challenges that exist there, I think, can be better addressed in a unified Ireland than they can individually. And you know, one of the things that struck me, I was talking to one of my colleagues, Representative Kevin Honan, who is the Dean of the House in Massachusetts. He is one of 5 legislators. I have 160 colleagues in the House. He's one of 5 whose parents came from Ireland. So he's just that first generation here. 20-some years ago, there was 25 members in the House who had parents who came from Ireland. And so again, part of it to me is there's a momentum now where there's still that generational tie that we don't have to explain things to. We understand it because we're so intimately involved in it, that we also want to take advantage of here in the United States. And again, I think there's an incredibly high willingness from both the president and in Congress to want to see a unified Ireland and to support that. And so we need to all do the work to meet this moment and not let it pass us by in any one of the critical ways and determinants of having it happen.
Yeah, again, it goes back to the economy and giving people an opportunity to go to work and stay in the community that they love and raise their family in a new, peaceful community. And, you know, when I'm up in Belfast and go to see City, where hundreds of people are employed, and I come home to Buffalo, and City is right there with a couple thousand people employed. You know, again, shared interests, a company investing in both communities. One of the things I'm working on right now is trying to get a transatlantic flight out of Buffalo Niagara International Airport, Aer Lingus, direct to Dublin, connecting our great countries. In Buffalo, you know, we have got the largest James Joyce collection in the world in Buffalo, New York, at the University at Buffalo. And its sister collection is at Mali in Dublin, the Museum of Literature, Ireland. We just secured $10 million for the James Joyce Museum at the University at Buffalo. And you think about how we connect our countries again in about the future and how do we make the Irish pride apparent and present in today's generation. It's by making investments. And you think about what Tom DiNapoli, our great New York State Comptroller, has done in investing our state pension dollars into the north of Ireland to make sure that New York State, however we can, is doing its part in promoting a peaceful future in the north. And at the same time, the return on that investment has benefited the taxpayers and the workers here that depend upon a strong pension system. So it works both ways, and we're so interconnected by our economies, especially here in New York, and I would argue Massachusetts as well, the Northeast states that have such strong Irish connections and heritage. And you know, the Irish American Legislators Association nationally was born out of a concept that started here in New York with the American Irish Legislators Society that started in the early 1980s by some New York State legislators. And we worked with Senator Daley to replicate that, and now it's every single state in the nation is represented. And I think it's very, very good for all of us to have, and this is a bipartisan panel here, to have members at every level of government, but driven by the community and driven by all these amazing organizations that are so engaged with Irish culture and heritage, driving a message for the future.
So, in closing, I just want to get your take on today's conference at the summit, and what's your takeaway from today? When you go back to your constituency, when you go back to your colleagues in the Senate and in the House of Representatives, what's going to be your takeaway? What's new that's changed your mind today, if anything?
Well, I will share that one of the most exciting things I think about what's going on right now is the number of women who are helping lead in Unified Ireland. So congratulations to I chair the Women's Caucus in the House in Massachusetts, and so I'm always loving when I get an opportunity to hear from somebody who is making such a difference in the world. So it was incredible to hear from Mary Lou. Exciting to see what's happening in Ireland. My colleagues, this is really at the forefront for a lot of us. We're Massachusetts, right? So, when I was coming here today, I talked to a bunch of my colleagues who I just took the trip to Ireland with, saying, hey, I'm going to be here. I'm part of this exciting opportunity today. What do you think is important to relay? This is something that's very present in our lives as members of the legislature in Massachusetts. Now, again, Massachusetts has, like New York, a long, strong, proud history of being passionate about Ireland. But I think in general, there is just a huge understanding that this is an opportunity for us, that we are on the precipice of change, permanent change here in Ireland. And we have a responsibility in our role as legislators to make sure that we are continuing to talk about that. When I came back from Ireland, I recorded one of my local shows talking about, here is what I did when I was in Ireland, here's what I heard, here's what I saw, here's what's exciting. Coming home from here today, I have so much to share. All of the panels were really fantastic. I learned so much. As somebody who's actually really invested in this, I still learned so much today that I can take back and share. And I think it's incredibly important that we have opportunities like this. To your earlier question, making sure that the cultural awareness and opportunities are present in this country is a part of it. Sharing what it means to be an Irish American is important. And having events like this is really important. And I'm hoping that this is going to be on something that is on YouTube and that I can share out with others so that they too can hear the remarkable conversation that's occurred here today.
Maybe we'll do this in Boston someday.
I would love to do it in Boston someday.
Tim, closing remarks?
Yeah, I think it's inspiring. What an inspiring day, inspiring panel, and just the message. The message of Irish unity, that we are going to see a unified Ireland in our lifetime, God willing. And this is something we should all be proud of.
You are a little younger than me.
Something we should all be proud of, all of us having played a role, big and small. And it's also a reminder, because there's a lot of this going on, and I think it's important. It's a reminder that we have to continue to get the message out there. We're not there yet, and we have to see it through to completion. So thank you for making me a part of this today.
Thank you both for coming. Thank you. All right, moving right along, we have one of our other sponsoring organizations that's going to come up and say a few words. Sorry about that. Is he here?
He's right here.
Okay.
And right after him is Kathy and Donald.
Brian O'Keefe from the Friendly Sons of St. Pat on Long Island. Brian?
Thank you, Marty. I'm going to keep my remarks brief because I was once like you, meaning a member of the audience, and I'll be a member again in about 4 minutes. But I want to thank Marty, and I want to thank Sinn Féin in general for what they've done over the years in uniting us. This was a Sinn Féin event, and we honored Rita earlier in the program, and Rita really was the face of the peace process for us, the reunification process for us Irish Americans. Jerry Adams would come, Martin McGuinness would come, both heroes of mine, but Rita was the face of it. And I know if you noticed that Marty choked up a little when he mentioned Rita. Marty genuinely loved Rita, and Rita is the inspiration for Marty, and I think now Marty Glennon is the face of Irish America in New York. So put your hands together for Marty Glennon. The Friendly Sons of St. Patrick, we're a fraternal organization. Our focus is charitable work that encourages supporting Irish heritage and the peace process. We've always been staunch supporters of the Good Friday Agreement, and we would like to see a united Ireland as everyone else here would. You all know the book, How the Irish Saved Civilization by Thomas Cahill, about the Irish monks and how they preserved all the antiquities. I think someday civilization is going to say that how the Irish saved civilization is the Good Friday Agreement. And the Good Friday Agreement did bring a generation of peace to the people of Ireland, which is infinitely valuable. But what civilization needs is that referendum, regardless of the outcome of that referendum. Because when you have that referendum, people who espouse solving political disputes through peaceful democratic processes, they can point to that. They can say the Irish chose peace, and then they got their vote. Now, we all know how we want that vote to go, but however way that vote goes, once you have that, that will give advocates for peace that citation in history of how peace works. And that's another reason why we need that referendum. So, another lesson that we learned today was how important it's going to be to have a tone of inclusion when you're talking about reunited Ireland. I mean, the gentleman, Gary, I thought he was amazing. I thought he stole the show about how there are some people maybe who have previously had a unionist bent, or people of the Protestant faith. They're going to want to feel welcome in New Ireland somehow. You want it such that when there is a united Ireland, that the people who were of the unionist tradition before that say, you know what, this isn't so bad. This isn't as bad as we thought it would be. Now, we talked about what we as organizations can do. I think we have to get younger. All of us have to get, our organizations have to get younger, because we need the younger people to be engaged in what's going on. And I generally trust in Sinn Féin because they know what they're doing in terms of reuniting Ireland and ending partition. Whoever came up with that specific date, 2030, that was very smart, because that gives us a way to focus and to energize people that this date is coming. Now, I know that's an arbitrary date right now, but if you want to mobilize folks, you use that date. 2030 is as far into the future as 2018 is in the past. It's not a lot of time. And as Professor O'Leary said, you don't just want to win by one vote, right? You want it to show that this is what the people want. You want it to be a substantial win there. So I promise to keep this short, but again, thank you all for coming, and enjoy the rest of the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. So next up is Donald O'Coin and Kathy Stanton. They are representatives of the New York City and Nassau County Brehons.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to thank Marty and Craig and Kieran for their amazing work putting together this panel and the wonderful speakers. I feel that there's a buzz in the room. I think everybody's energized and knows what they have to do now to take the message home. But a little bit of an introduction. My name is Kathy Stanton. I'm the president of the Brehon Law Society of Nassau County. Donald's going to be speaking next. He's the president of the Brehon Law Society of New York, and I just want to give you a little background on the organizations. These sister organizations came into existence in 1978 in New York and 2002 in Nassau County. For those who are unfamiliar with the Brehon Law Society, the organization takes its name from the body of ancient Celtic law that defined and governed legal relationships on the island of Ireland. From earliest times, Brehon law was distinguished by its egalitarianism and by its respect for fundamental rights and liberties. Inspired by the strongly humanitarian tradition embodied in the Brehon law, the members of the Brehon Law Society strive to use their talents to protect, to defend, and to extend human rights, principally but not exclusively, in the north of Ireland. We are comprised primarily of lawyers, judges, and other law-related personnel, but we're not inclusive of them. The activities of our organization are guided by the view that unless the root causes of political conflict and social injustice are responsibly addressed and ultimately resolved, systematic violation of human rights will continue unabated in the 6 northeastern counties of Ireland that constitute the north of Ireland. Our organizations jointly commit to Irish unity, which is why this summit is so important. The Good Friday Agreement was just one of the monumental steps forward to achieving the goal of Irish unity, but we have not yet crossed the finish line. The struggle to unite is more urgent now in light of turmoil in the world, and it's important that we keep Irish unity in the forefront of people's minds. Irish unity will benefit all people of Ireland, whether they live in the north or the south, and I truly believe that Irish unity will not only assist in the country of Ireland, but in other countries around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And as Kathy stated, my name is Donal O'Cahoyne, the current president of the Brehon Law Society in New York City. We understand that Irish America, I think as Glenn put it pretty well earlier on, has a role in creating a new Ireland, and we're very appreciative that you brought this conversation to our doorstep. Bheith páirteach scéal mar seogas an scéalagus an bóthar a raig a bhún lú is privileged on the bhúris in doing. It's very much a privilege that you brought it here and that we can be part of shaping it, hopefully. Challenges in recent years, such as a protocol, getting an Irish Language Act enacted, and even appointing a First Minister show that progress can be slow in Northern Ireland, even though each of those things was supported by the majority of people in the 6 counties. They were delayed again, and the old guard made people scared of change. But in the end, they were done, and the world continued turning. We might hear similar conversations about what we're doing here today, but it's always the right time to talk about unity, about what unity means, and how to prepare for unity. Anything else is irresponsible. Finally, I want to mention something that both organisations have followed very closely. It came up today as well, which is the legacy legislation. We, like all Irish Americans and all political parties in Ireland, see this legislation for what it is, which is an attempt to whitewash the involvement of the British government in the conflict. We welcome the decision of the High Court in Belfast last week, but also, in reading parts of the decision, understand the limits of that ruling. We are also thankful for the case brought by the Irish government on legacy in Europe. More so than just fighting the legacy legislation, we hope that all victims have access to justice through a properly funded legal system where all defendants are obliged to fully disclose what needs to be disclosed. No more delays, no more denying justice, an end to the legacy legislation. Gurd Míle Maithagibh.